Hello and welcome to, yes, week 15 in the psychology of personality. This is our last week together. It's been a heavy end to the class. I know that we've been doing 2 chapters each time, doing 2 more chapters. Hope we can finish the course strong. We have lots of things to do. I want to start out by saying thank you for such a great semester. The work that you've done, the exploration of your own personal personalities and the people around you have been really exemplary. And I've totally enjoyed the conversations that we've been able to have. And it's a joy for me to be a part of your educational journey here. It's been really fun for me as an instructor to read the work and I'm going to say it, the growth, the application of this knowledge in your own lives and stuff, and it just feels so impactful to have this sort of journey with you. So this week, this last week in class, we are taking on chapters 19 and chapters 20, and they're not as close to, it's not like they're paired together because the content is related to each other. We're really looking at chapter 19, cognitive perspectives, of personality, and then in chapter 20 looking at personality disorders. So we start off with chapter 19 really looking at how we can connect our understanding of how we process information to the development of our own personality. And we have to start off, one of my favorite models for understanding cognition is one that how it changes over time is, of course, Piaget's genetic epistemology. That's the official term for it. His cognitive theory. Here we have a little graphic in the course book that goes through the 4 stages from the bottom, the least complex cognitive processes, all the way up to formal or operational thinking that Piaget felt was the peak of human cognition. There are theories that are post Piaget, things that happen after that post formal operational thinking. But if we just look at this model right here, we can see that if we look at this is how these individuals, how all of us develop through time and how we understand the world. And we can think about this and how we understand ourselves, or the creation of our personality schema. The schema being a idea, a notion of understanding of something in the world, and the schema qualitatively changes over time. So in the sensory motor stage, in those first 2 years, we see that an individual's sense of themselves is really not even in place yet. They might not see themselves as separate from the world, not enough cognitive structures going on there to be able to recognize that they are a separate person. Through these first couple years, the development of object permanence, including themselves and other people, and the development of a sense of other starts to develop. Very, very little of what we would call personality. We're really looking at temperament, we're looking at genetic factors, we're looking at environmental factors producing behaviors and whatnot. Not a whole lot of personality yet. We move into the next stage, the pre-operational stage, and this is when things start to happen. The person is learning language, and some of that language is used to describe the self. They start to recognize objects. They don't necessarily reason the logical relationship between those objects, but they start to develop a sense of social role. They start to develop a sense. This is where the gender roles start to happen and start to solidify. The actual development of theory of mind, where an individual, another individual in the world will see the world from their perspective, and that's unique from my perspective. That whole Freud talked, it's a separation, individuation. I'm separating, I'm becoming this entity of myself, and this starts to develop, but it's at a very, very basic level. when we look at Piaget's next stage in concrete operational, we start to see an even stronger connection between the words that they use to describe themselves and the person they are in their social world. However, most of these are still concrete. Let me talk about formal operational thinking first, and then we'll come back to comparing. There's the formal operational thinking is when a person starts to think abstractly about qualities and things that are in their universe. And that's different than this concrete. So what you might see in terms of a transition between concrete operational and formal operational thinking in terms of the self is the individual in concrete operational thinking will talk about they have friends, they're good at soccer, they like math, they are a male, and they understand the social roles of males and understand where they are not in alignment with those social roles of males. All of that sort of stuff like that. Formal operational thinking, well, actually, when the individual can start using relatively vague terms like I'm friendly as a characteristic of the person. I'm friendly, I'm outgoing, I can sense sometimes my frustration at certain kinds of things. You start seeing the individual starts to be able to see themselves as an abstract entity with predetermined components that are there regardless of the situations that change. And we start really formulating within our mind this idea of what is personality, other than this sort of like ways in which we are that are fairly consistent across different situations. And the exceptions to that. Normally I'm a really friendly person unless someone cuts me off, or something like that. We might have this sense of who we are. So we see this progression through the lifespan of individuals changing their understanding of themselves based on the progression of changes in cognitive ability, the qualitative changes in their cognitive abilities matching that process. And so that's our first model here. It's in the attention section, and we move into a further development of that by Kelly and personal construct. So schema, construct, essentially the same word. You're looking at very, very complex ideas here, gathered over time, built over time to allow us to develop who we are. And we see with Kelly's work so I'll read it right out of the course book here. We have Kelly's concepts propose that we are all scientists of some sort, that we all seek to control the circumstances and events in our lives, and will continually experiment with different ways to do this. This is Kelly's concept of man the scientist. So this interaction between ourselves and our world, and this is so Piaget. Piaget had equal terminology to this, that the exploring child is a scientist who is experimenting, at a very, very basic level, the properties of objects within their world. So Kelly puts together a number of what he calls corollaries. His term for this, we have, just go through them really quickly here. We have the construction corollary. We anticipate our future. Individuality corollary. People differ in terms of the construction of events. That's how I experience the world. Our organizational corollary, relationship between constructs and reality. We have dichotomy. The entirety of the construction is made up of a finite number of dichotomous structures. Pros, cons, yes, no's, positives, negatives, likes, dislikes. Choice, the degree to which we have agency to make choices in our life. Our range, our ability to be able to predict a range of events, but also see our own limits in terms of our capacities. experience, corollary. We create this to represent how our circumstances change as we become more experiences. As I put in there, my knowledge of the political climate and college community and culture have greatly been changed the longer I work there. Modulation, corollary, these are some of the factors that can modify my construction. Sorry about the spelling here. Are easier to modify. Some aspects of my personality are easier to modify than others. We have lots of constructions to choose from. We can employ them and to anticipate or respond to change in our environment. That's the fragmentation corollary. Commonality, this is working with others. And sociality, this is how my actions impact the constructs of others. It's a rather complex set of ways in which we interact with the world around us, and each one of these provides us with the opportunity to construct our identity even more. We move on here to probably one of my favorite theories early in my studies of personality, and that is the narrative theory. And this is the actual concept that I am the author of an incredible movie. I'm the author, I'm the script writer, I'm the lead actor, I'm the director, I'm the costume designer. I mean, well, not really, but I set the stage, I set goals for, the upcoming parts of my life, the acts in my life, and I create this thing called my life. And it tells a story. And I have a story. And each one of you has a story that describes what you've been through, who you are, how those things have interacted in a way that allows you to construct the person that you are now. Notice I'm still in that constructionist mode, of building our personality. We see with that, however, sometimes we engage in activities where we establish a number of very, very rigid beliefs that are not necessarily to our advantage. And we refer to these as, from Albert Ellis's work, Rational Emotive Therapy, came this list of irrational beliefs that we have, that we unconditional, we expect to be loved by everybody, must be absolutely perfect at everything that I do. Everybody should act considerately. They should act considerately, and everything should be fair. It's awful when terrible things happen. Emotional disturbances are usually caused by external factors. If something is or may be dangerous or fearsome, I should be constantly and excessively thinking about that. One cannot and must not face life's responsibilities and difficulties, and it is easier to avoid them. Remember, these are not functional. These are belief systems that we can get to that get us in trouble. We must be dependent on others. One's past is an all, that's it. That I had these things happen in the past. That's why I'm who I am now. Other people's problems should upset me. And this is an invariably a right, precise, and perfect solution to human problems. All of these are ways in which Albert Ellis identified his patients were thinking illogically, because none of these are true. But yet we may hold on to those things. People talk about being perfectionists. It's okay to be conscientious. It's okay to strive to be the best you can actually be, but to strive for perfection, really? That is even theoretically essentially impossible. Just being the best you is going to be it. I see it sometimes in, you know, um, assignments that come in and individuals striving for perfection, and sometimes to the degradation of their own work, because what I'm looking for is your sense of a topic. I'm not looking for a perfect description. I'm looking for your description, which should contain elements of your imperfect self, which is perfect. It's what I'm shooting for, let alone what I know is there. So, when we look at the narrative identity theory, we're going to be doing that in the assignment. In that assignment, you are going to be taking an important story from your life, an individual event. It does not have to be traumatic. In fact, I would go with the non-traumatic ones, but an important event in your life, what you did, and you're going to provide 3 sources of data. You're going to provide S data, which is self-report. Then you're going to do B data, which is behavioral, people who were there who observed you. So there's you in that situation, people who were there that observed the situation. And then finally, a third party, an informant, describe that situation to them and get their notions as to what this is. So in this particular approach to narrative identity theory, that story, we're going to look at one story in your complete narrative, and how you acted and played out, how a situation played out, and then someone who was there, their perceptions of you as a partaker in that situation, and then the third party looking at the situation and determining that. In order to develop a deep understanding of that situation. So that is going to be the assignment. The Chapter 19 discussion is going to look at sharing how beliefs and attitudes and what have shaped experiences in your life. And potentially, any of you want to share times when you might have skidded over to the irrational side of things. Maybe there was a time that you found that was a barrier to you, struggled with that idea of these absolutes and whatnot. So that is the discussion and the assignment for Chapter 19. Chapter 20, we switch gears, just like in an intro psych class, you might, going through all that and get to the last chapter, and it's abnormal. So we're looking at, well, if almost everything that we've been talking about, this class is taught from a normative perspective. Everything that we are talking about, including, to some degree, irrational beliefs, you're just kind of fringing onto that. It all lies within normal behavior. So when we're looking at personality and we're thinking about, well, what is abnormal? We have to come up with a definition as to how do we determine what is abnormal versus what is just different and diverse. And there's a lot of differences and lots of diversity that have to do with normality. So in my abnormal class, I start off the course with the 3 factors that I consider important in determining whether something is abnormal. Something is abnormal when it's rare. There's a statistical component to something being abnormal. If something is happening all the time, then it becomes normal. Just like, and we've been using this word post-pandemic, what's the new normal? What's the behaviors that for a time were radical changes from what we were behaving like before, and then now when those circumstances that necessitated those changes are gone, some people didn't come back. Some people changed. I don't mean that in a morbid way. Some people didn't return to their previous behavior. They've established new norms. And if those behaviors just manifested without the pandemic, they would be seen as abnormal. But now, because so many people are doing it, these varied behaviors, it's now become a new norm. And the next one here, the next criteria is social perception of the behavior. Is the behavior acceptable or not? And that works very closely with this idea of whether or not something is normal statistically. So unusual, rare behaviors, once they start to happen more frequently, move from abnormal into normal based on the societal perception of those things. So something is abnormal. We have two so far. Something is abnormal because it's rare, positive or negative. Being a multi-billionaire is rare. So that's abnormal. So is schizophrenia. So we have the statistical portion of normalness. Then we look at society. What kind of behaviors are unacceptable based on society? And that can go anywhere from putting your elbows on the table at dinner to committing crimes. And we consider that behavior abnormal. And there's a whole swath of other abnormal behaviors that we glorify. Incredible talent, incredible wealth, incredible intelligence, all of these things which are equally rare, but are determined wonderful by society. Then we look at the last one, and that is, to what degree does the behavior that we're looking at interfere with the individual's day-to-day functioning? We define that as the ability for relationships to support themselves, take care of themselves, maybe earn income, and stuff like that. And we, how does it interfere with that? Now, if there is a behavior that all at the same time, it's rare, unaccepted by society, and interferes with function, we call that a mental illness. That's how we determine the mental illness. There are mental disorders that don't necessarily meet all that criteria because someone can still be functioning. Someone can still be, acting in ways that are being acceptable within their community or whatever and stuff like that. And maybe it's not that rare. So it's some forms of depression, like dysthymia. It's a common form of the blues kind of thing. And Prozac was the drug that was created for that, and it was basically prescribed so much around the country that dysthymia, its occurrence, moved from rare to common. That it was common for people to have a diagnosis of dysthymia. Now, whether they really had dysthymia, it's kind of a moot point. Felt the blues, got a medication for it, felt better. But it kind of moves that, what would be a mental illness, into a mental disorder, but just doesn't meet all those criteria. These are my definitions, by the way, how I understand the world when I'm, mental illness, it's across the board. Mental disorder, a lot of the people in counseling and therapy and whatnot are working on those issues and whatnot. And then, managing stress and those kinds of things. Trying to keep people away from this being a mental illness, to every degree that we can. So we're looking through here to abnormal and normal. Yeah, I was in the wrong chapter here on my book. We start looking at, introduce you to the my favorite test, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. Just fun to say, the MMPI. You look at the questions in there, and this is not a normal personality test. This is an abnormal personality test. So it's specifically designed to measure abnormal personality. And then we can look at a well-known personality personality theory, the big five. And we can see when maybe there's too much of a good thing. So here we have this chart here. You look at neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and each one of these high and low. And you yourself all scored taking this test. Now, we can see, let's take extroversion. We can see there's all the normal levels of extroversion lie within the circle, high to low. But then it starts going outside the circle, let's say below, you start getting into social withdrawal, detached coldness. These are a little extreme. And then on the other end of extroversion, we have attention seeking, excitement seeking, maybe risk taking, those kinds of things. We see this kind of span for each one of these characteristics of our personality. So, as long as we're in the middle somewhere, we're not acting in ways that lie outside, then we're in the norm. It's going to be in those extraneous ones outside of the norm where you're going to start saying, well, how rare is it? How socially acceptable is it? And how does it interfere with somebody's functioning? We then move on to a examination of the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's in its 5th edition, text revised, and so DSM-5-TR is I believe, the most current version of that. So unless you're a clinician, you don't really get this document, but you can see that in DSM-5 actually introduced a very new way to deal with what we used to refer to as personality disorders. When we had 5 ways in which that we categorize the major mental illnesses, and then substance, I think it was personality disorders, substance use, health, and then I think it was a general, I'm thinking GAD, but it's not that. The maximum that somebody's been able to be functional, the 5 axes. There it is. It's all coming back now. It's been a while. The 5 axes that we used to use for diagnosis. The personality one is now sort of separate, and it's divided into clusters. And I had those in the course book to introduce you to that. And then finally, we're left with Millen's evolutionary model, which is controversial for sure, but recognizes disorders as reactions to unusual circumstances. And we can certainly credit that with having some very valid contributions to our understanding of mental illness. Now, those mental illness and mental disorders and stress and and whatnot, that these the circumstances can happen, but they can happen because of choices. They can happen because of random chance. They can happen because we're living in an environment that is abusive or neglectful and whatnot. And it brings out the worst in us, if we're going to talk about it that way. Lots of different ways in which people can react to stress. Some people's reactions to stress are not necessarily functional. They might be getting in the way of their they might move them into that world of mental disorder, mental illness. So we're left here with chapter 20, discussions, where I want you to talk about issues that you've observed or experienced or whatnot, and how your reaction may be different from your normal personality. Think about circumstances pushing you in a way that you act uncharacteristically to a particular situation because you are adapting to an extreme situation. Sharing some of that happens to all of us. Things push our buttons. We lose our cool. we act outside of our, normal selves, might regret it. That's the discussion. So we're kind of really looking at this adaptive component, all this stuff on abnormal personality. But what we're going to discuss is the one that is usually shared by everyone, and that is that we have sometimes had to felt compelled or knee-jerk reaction or found ourselves acting in a way that was uncharacteristic to our own personality, to how we view ourselves. Oh boy, that just as I said that, we have the real self, the ideal self, the social self. Maybe something came along and it revealed a true self component, something you might need to work on. If we want to grab that out of the archives and bring this into the discussion, sometimes we don't really see how our personality works until we're under strain. And then they may be uncharacteristic, but they might be characteristic ways in which we act when we are under strain, which become part of our personality. So could be an exploration of that as well. So that's it, just a discussion. That's all we have going on. And now, at this last week is when we now have, and I think I looked in there, and there were like 31 of you who have already done this assignment. So hopefully got my message that the autoethnography should go on the rubric alone. I kind of messed up on the instructions in that one. Currently working on that for next year. Make sure I fix all that. And but essentially, almost all of you have done this assignment already. I just need to go and grade it, and that's the autoethnography assignment that is due this week as well. So please refer if you have not done that. Or if you're just learning about this now, if you have done that and you feel that your paper does not reflect an accurate work from you relative to the grading rubric, not the course book, then feel free to go in and resubmit. If you want to do, take a shot at that and tell me about it. I'm going to start grading these gradually over the week, and I think we'll be all set. That's it. The big week, end the week, really strong. But then, there's a break. And for some of you, you'll be leaving UMA. Some of you are graduating. I do want to tell you that I will be in attendance. My plan is to be in attendance at the UMA graduation. That is in the morning. KVCC's graduation is later that day at the Civic Center. But I have a good friend who is graduating this semester, all of you people. And some of you will be graduating. And so I'll be around. So maybe I'll see some of you. Maybe you'll introduce yourselves to me. That would be really fun. And not necessary. You're there. That's your event. I'm going to go and celebrate it with you. If I don't meet you, I am there in spirit. So I look forward to that. Thank you again for such a great class. I hope this has been meaningful. I hope it's been fun. Don't forget to do the course evaluations. Those are very important to me. I like to read those. And take care in all of your, those of you who are graduating, you're heading off to your next steps. Some of you will be continuing at UMA. I will self-promote a little bit. I am teaching a new class for me, which is, not new for me, new at UMA for me. Behavior management. I'll be teaching behavior management in the summer. So if people that are interested in that is a very technical course, more so than any other course that I have, which kind of leans toward philosophical explorations. I'm also hoping over the summer I will be developing a neuroscience class for UMA, and I'm working in cooperation with the psych department there to develop that class. And I'm not sure when that's going to be ready or when that's going to come out, but next year sometime. So there's my self-promotion. Take much care. Have a great summer. Thank you again for such a great class, and I will see you around.